Well, hello, Purple Raiders and Purple Raider friends. Welcome to our first episode, and hopefully not our last episode, of Coffee with Tom. So I've got my University of Mount Union Dad mug all filled up with coffee and am joined today by Harry Paidas. We're going to be talking a little bit about the 175th anniversary of the University of Mount Union and some of that history and how we got there. So I'm really thrilled to have Harry with us. Harry, could you tell us a little bit about how you came to Mount Union? And you're the author of our 175th anniversary update book, and you're working on that now. So how'd you get here, and how'd you end up being the author of our history of the university?
Well, we in a 15-minute segment, I'm gonna have to keep this brief. But anyway, great to be with you, Tom, and congratulations on being the president. I couldn't have made a better choice. As you know, we were colleagues at one time back in the day, and for you to have gone off and come back and become the president is really a master stroke on the part of the board. So congratulations to them and to you. I know things, once we get this pandemic squared away, it's going to go great. But just to answer your question, yeah, I'm from Warren, Ohio originally, and I came to Mount Union as a young guy in 1970 and graduated in 1974. And you know, at the time, Ron Weber was the president, and it was kind of interesting. I had a tie in there in that my uncle was on the board of trustees, George Gentithis, and Ron Weber happened to be his classmate. And so when I stepped on campus, it was like, oh, you're George Gentithis' nephew. So I automatically had this great rapport going with the president of Mount Union. Well, I left for, about 10 years. I worked at Capital University, Wittenberg University, Mid-American Athletic Conference. And I got a call from Ernie Sheets, who was the vice president for development at the time. Hey, you interested in coming back to alma mater and serving as the director of public information? We've got an opening. And I kind of thought I'd launched my career in a different direction, but sure, I'll come and talk. Well, I couldn't resist. I came back. Mount was at 890 students at the time, and not doing real well, I might add. And I had 2 children at the time, young children, and so I decided to come back. And then I stayed, obviously, in various capacities at Mount, both as a faculty member and as administrator, PR director, and vice president for public affairs and marketing for 25 years. And, I guess when it came time, push came to shove, when it came time for someone to write the history of the last 25, 30 years or so, as it turns out, I guess I became sort of a natural, and the fact that you got some advice, I think, to maybe ask me, and I've thought about it a long time because I know it's really involved, and but it's been a great project so far. I'm not done yet, but I'm almost.
You're the third author of the history of the university. We had Yost Osborne, and then John Saffel, and so you have more of a history scholarly background there, and you're coming more from the world of PR and communications. So did you learn anything from when you're looking back at how they approached it and think about, well, what's different now? I'm sure the university is way different than the one that they wrote back 1846 and talking about Orville Nelson Hartshorne and Lewis Miller and places that we have those names still around and the memories of some of their vision for the university. So how'd that work for you?
Well, it was really interesting, and I address it in my foreword as I write. Why did I do this? Why did I take on this project? I knew both of them. I knew Newell Yost Osborne, and I knew John Saffel. I had John Saffel. He was the very first professor that I encountered when I was a student at Mount, and he was great. I loved his style of teaching. We remain, even up until he died in his late 90s. He may have even reached 100. I'm not exactly, the historian doesn't remember all this, but he did live to be a ripe old age, and he still smoked his pipe. In fact, he got a room at Copeland Oaks on the first floor, which he had been waiting for because he wanted to be able to go out and smoke his pipe. And that, by the way, if you entered Chapman Hall in those days, the smell of pipe smoke was everywhere. All these professors smoked pipes, And so anyway, those were really fond memories I had, just not only the actual having them in class and having these discussions, but even the smells, I can still remember that pipe smoke in Chapman Hall. It was really incredible.
Yeah, I think
But
it's going to be
getting back
wonderful
to,
to read that history of all these people because even Chapman Hall, Paul Chapman, one of our former faculty, used to nod his head
right,
and let people think that that was named after him, even though the building was started in 1862. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't Paul Chapman
true.
that started it. But
No, it wasn't.
so this next volume is going to come out sometime around when we have our 175th anniversary celebration kicking off in early October. Is that right?
Well, I hope to make it. I think early October might be pushing it a little bit, but the game plan was maybe to get it out before Thanksgiving, so it could be a gift. People want to
Okay.
buy a book about non-union history. It could be for the alums to maybe purchase. Hopefully, it's worthy of such a thing. I think it will be. I think it's been fun, writing about it. But that's the time frame anyway. I'm at the right now. I've pretty much finished the writing from the perspective of just tone and getting it all out there. I have not gone over it with a fine tooth comb. I've got some people editing, including yourself. You've got final editing rights, Tom. But again, the approach here is going to be just a little bit different than what you would have seen from Saffel and Osborne. Theirs was very, you hit it on the head. They're history profs who write well. I kind of come at it from a journalistic point of view, and so I'm writing, but my history might not be quite as precise as theirs. For example, I was an English major at Mount, and I hated term papers and footnotes and stuff, So, but there's ways to attribute in journalism that you don't have to do in English. So this is written that way. You're not going to
That's
see too
good.
many footnotes. You're going to see a lot of attribution, though, as far as things go.
So when I was thinking about what are the big stories here, I mean, some of them obviously are going to be things like athletics, not just all our championships, but the incredible rise of women's athletics on this campus. And part of that I know because starting here in 1989 and my first time through, some terrific teams and seeing the students do that. What were the two or three things that you saw and you went, that really changed the trajectory of Mount Union College, soon to be the University of Mount Union, for the better? What sort of things did you find that you went, that really worked out?
Yeah. I'll start with athletics first because that's the first thing that came to my mind. And it wasn't about football. I mean, I knew all about football. I'd gone to just about every game and have gone to about every game during this time frame, including every Stag Bowl that we've participated in. And so football, that's a given. I mean, our success in football has just been incredible, and it's put us on the map as far as Mount's concerned. But the rise of women's athletics is really a big point in this, because when I was here in the 70s, it wasn't really organized sports at all. I mean, we had teams, but nobody really followed them. Marge Cook, bless her heart, she was a great faculty member who tried to get the women together in various sports, but it just wasn't there. So I went to, it's kind of interesting how this works. Pam Creedon, who used to be the public information director at Mount back in the, I actually worked for her as a work study student. She wrote to me when she found out I was doing this history, and she wanted to participate because she was there. She was there when the transformation happened, when we started having organized teams. And I basically let her write the introduction to that sentence, or to that period of time. So there'll be a little segment there that talks about, Pam making the transition into, real life athletes.
I had a chance to talk to her,
and then I go,
the
and then I take
stories
it
of
from
these
there.
athletes, many of whom in my career were 18 to 22 years old, and now they're 40 and 50 years old, and they still know how to play as a team and how to win and how to be champions. So that's exciting. Tell me about somebody or some person in the book who was sort of an unsung hero, somebody that, as we go back in our history, we go, wow, they really made an impact. And as you read the materials and got ready to write, you went, there's a bigger story there than many people know.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because there are several. And one that comes to mind right away is a guy named Harold Hall, and it has to do with international education. Had Harold not been the go-getter that he was, and he wasn't, it's not like he was being directed by somebody to, hey, go out there and do this or go out there and do that. Harold just had this passion for getting international kids here and for our kids to get over there, and so Harold, again, during this time frame that I'm covering, he's not quite as active at that point, but he got guys like Bill Coleman involved and Frank Triplett involved and Mark Himmeline involved, all of whom are people that, a lot of our alums will know, younger alums will know. And that doesn't happen unless Harold Hall is the go-getter that he is. And we wouldn't have internationalized the curriculum. I really don't think so. I don't think it was a natural thing for Mount Union to do, but it took a series of people to get really interested.
I think Harold opened the gate for those faculty, the Jennifer Halls and the Greg Cortads and others, Hamako Furuhara,
there you go,
who arrived, and then faculty who took an interest in international, many of whom are still here. Jamie Capuzza, for example, has become a world traveler and doing a lot of research. There's so many faculty that have done that. And Harold was one of those that came and just, he got the purple, and he wanted to make sure that we were actively engaged. Who else is an unsung hero that's going to?
Well, and I'll go back to athletics, but Susie Vennett, Susie Vennett, who's our women's basketball coach. If you look at what I write in the book about women's basketball, it really doesn't start until Susie Vennett comes here as a freshman and lights the place on fire, and people start coming to our games, and there's more more fans at our women's games than there are at men's games. She's a terrific player, but not only that, she's a terrific person. And so when she leaves a few years later to go, get her schooling and in terms of coaching and so forth, she, Larry Karras taps her to come back as the coach. And guess what? She does the same thing as a coach that she did as a student. And again, our women's basketball program, and that brings everything else up. It brings all the other women's programs up.
Well, Susie was one of my students, and I kid her sometimes about having to shoot when the others weren't ready, but had the floor vision that you just don't normally see. And some of those students back then would take on a role, and they made those teams into champions and into winners. And so that's been kind of exciting too, to see somebody that I met as an 18-year-old, and now they're leading some of our efforts. So I'm really looking forward to the book and talking to a lot of the alums about the things that we didn't know when we have it come out. I'm sure it's going to be, well, don't you remember this or this, and some of the other,
I hope. Mm-hmm.
Some of the other stories, because I've been fortunate in this odd year we've had to be able to talk to some alums remotely, and they've told me stories about things that happened 50, 60 years ago and how they've spun forward to make Mount Union the place it is today. So Harry, 175 years from now, and I'm not planning to ask you to write the next update at that point.
I might not be able to do that for some reason.
What do you think about Mount Union? Where are we going to be then?
Boy, it's really hard to tell, Tom. I mean, if you would have told me in 1995 that we were going to be as technology oriented as we are here in 2021, I mean, I go into that in the book that Jim Claytor, the father of the modern internet at
1995.
Yep, exactly. And then John Kirchmeier, carrying that forward, then Tina Stuchel. But anyway, the big decision for Harold Kohlenbrander back in those days was, do we wire the dorms? What's this? That's a lot of money. I remember him saying, boy, that's a lot of money. I don't know if we want to go that route,
Yeah, Harry, the Burton Morgan Foundation gave us a grant to have a technology classroom in Chapman Hall. And recently I had a chance to talk to their executive director, and I had remembered correctly. We asked for $20,000. They gave us 21 because the Morgan Foundation wanted the room to be painted as well. And we put in like a VHS and a beta because you never knew which would dominate in the future.
That's right.
That was the start of part of working with Lattice and all these other things that have become part of, I'm sure, other parts of talking about who we are. And given the year that we just had, how fortunate we are to have had the John Kirchmeiers and the Tina Stuchels and others who came along and went, Jim Claytor and the way that they came in and said, let's make this a place that's got the technology. Louise Moses, that came in and talked about, let's have computer science and let's have info technology and move it forward. Well, as we got in the year of doing this, of sitting there having this sort of thing, how fortunate Mount Union was to have people that were that visionary. So I'm excited about that because I like to think about 175 years from now, because I know that when the day comes where they say, Tom, it's time for somebody else to do this, I want to think, down the road, they might say, he got a few things right back then. And
right.
And maybe I get a few words in the chapter of that update. So that's exciting.
Oh, yeah, I would hope so. And again, I don't, thinking about the whole lineage of our presidents, every one of them bought into the other guy's vision. You know, they created a vision of their own, but you'll see this thread going through Mount Union based on its presidents. You know, we did not have adversarial relationships one president to the next. It was you know, they were all different, but there was a flow there that I think has brought us to where we are. And I think that'll continue. I really think, you know, you're not a whole lot different than Hartshorn, Tom. I mean, you know, your thinking is probably right along the same lines as his. You're probably not as cantankerous as he was, but
I don't know that I use the word cosmic as much as he did. And so that, right. But the other part of it, and we have had, I've known the last 4 presidents, worked for and with 3 of them. Right. And it's been interesting to me to look back at our history in the early books and see Hartshorn and Miller working together. Hartshorn is this 23-year-old who had this vision and an incredible vision and some unique ways of looking at it. And Lewis Miller, who starts a lot of the Chautauqua operations, who says, but here's the way to do it in a business sense and make sure that it's sustainable. Right. So even though they might not have talked about 175 years, they built to that in 1846. And it's just terrific to see all that and how it's happening and going forward. Harry, I think we've probably run as long as we can and kept the alums interested. I hope exactly. When the book comes out that they'll join us for the events of the 175th anniversary. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got for us and what your co-authors, Dodie Davis and Bill Coleman, I'm sure that they're going to give a few inputs into it too. So thank to the 2 of them for supporting this effort. Harry, thank you for always being a Purple Raider and being there for us. And
thank you, Tom.
Enjoy your coffee.
Okay, will do. Actually, I have water, so I'll toast to you with my water. But thank you for having me, and I'm really looking forward to it. I just hope I can do it justice. It's such an incredible, rich history that I'm just afraid, you know, we won't be able to capture everything. But you know, I'm sure Saffel and Osborne felt the same way. So
fantastic. Go Purple Raiders.
Yes, sir, for sure.